This wasn't a wall to stop an invasion. Hadrian's Wall, stretching 73 miles across the narrowest point of northern Britain, was not built to repel a massive barbarian army. It wasn't designed for siege warfare. It wasn't Rome's last desperate barricade against chaos. That's the assumption: fortress against horde, civilization against wilderness. But the evidence tells a different story. It was built to control movement. The wall was a bureaucratic instrument, a processing system stretched across a landscape. Its purpose was visibility, predictability, administration. It made movement legible. It turned the flow of people, animals, and goods into something Roman authorities could see, record, and tax. The wall didn't stop the world, it organized it. The structure itself was monumental, but not impenetrable. In the east, stone construction, 15 feet high, 10 feet thick, with a walkway along the top. In the west, initially turf and timber, later rebuilt in stone. Every Roman mile, roughly 1,620 yards, a milecastle. A small fortified gateway with barracks for 8 to 32 men. Between each milecastle, 2 turrets, observation posts, signaling stations, 80 milecastles, 158 turrets, 16 full-scale forts positioned along or just behind the wall, garrisoning infantry and cavalry units. The wall was not a single barrier, it was a system. In front of it, to the north, a ditch, 27 feet wide, 9 feet deep in places where the ground allowed. Behind the wall, another earthwork, the vallum, a flat-bottomed ditch flanked by 2 mounds, creating a restricted military zone. The vallum didn't face outward, it faced inward. It marked the edge of controlled Roman space, separating the military installation from the civilian population to the south. This was infrastructure designed for routine. Most days, nothing happened, and that was the point. Soldiers walked the same patrol routes, watched from the same turrets, checked the same crossing points. The repetition was the control. Boredom was policy. The wall created a rhythm, and the rhythm created authority. Unpredictability was dangerous. Predictability was power. The gates were not locked. People crossed regularly: traders, herders, families, emissaries. But they crossed where Rome wanted them to cross, at milecastles, under observation. Their goods could be inspected, their identities noted, fees collected, information gathered. Movement wasn't forbidden, it was processed. Archaeologists have found writing tablets at Vindolanda, one of the forts near the wall, strength reports, duty rosters, requests for supplies, more beer, more sandals, a birthday party invitation from one officer's wife to another. These weren't warriors preparing for apocalypse. They were administrators managing infrastructure, soldiers keeping records, people living ordinary lives inside a system designed to make the extraordinary, uncontrolled human movement across a frontier impossible. The wall was not about war. It was about making the landscape readable. Behind the wall, another system, logistics. 16 forts, each housing between 500 and 1,000 soldiers. Auxiliary troops, not legionaries. Cavalry units from Spain, infantry from Gaul, archers from Syria. Specialist units rotated across the empire, stationed far from their homelands. They needed food, clothing, weapons, medical supplies, pottery, leather, metal. Grain stores capable of feeding a garrison through winter. Granaries with raised floors to prevent rot. Aqueducts bringing fresh water from miles away. At Housesteads, one of the largest forts, archaeologists uncovered latrine blocks with stone seating for multiple users, fed by a constant flow of water. Bathhouses with heated floors and changing rooms. Barracks, organized into centuries, each room shared by 8 men, sleeping, eating, storing gear in a space roughly 13 feet by 10. Officers' quarters were larger, with private rooms, hippocaust heating, sometimes attached gardens. Supply convoys arrived regularly from the south, grain from the lowlands, iron from regional forges, pottery from kilns in York or further south, wine and olive oil imported from the Mediterranean, lead for pipes, stone from local quarries, timber for construction and fuel. The wall didn't exist in isolation. It was the northern terminus of a logistics network that stretched across Britannia and connected back to Gaul, Iberia, Rome itself. And people made this network function, not just soldiers. Families lived in the civil settlements that grew outside most forts. Vici, traders, blacksmiths, bakers, prostitutes, bath attendants, children. The forts were military installations, but the communities around them were civilian. Women and children weren't officially part of the Roman military system, but they were part of its reality. Soldiers formed relationships, fathered children, built lives that extended beyond their term of service. At Vindolanda, a child's birthday invitation survives. A woman named Claudia Severa, writing to her friend Sulpicia Lepidina, inviting her to a celebration, written in ink on a thin wooden tablet. 2 women speaking across distance, arranging a social visit. The language is Latin, but the tone is intimate, universal. It's one of the earliest known examples of writing in Latin by a woman. Most soldiers spent more time on construction than combat, building roads, repairing gates, quarrying stone, hauling supplies, maintaining the very infrastructure that defined their posting. Boredom, routine, labor. The rhythm of garrison life wasn't heroic, it was tedious. And that tedium sustained the system far more effectively than any dramatic battle. Control didn't require constant violence. It required constant presence. Routine made the wall real. The same patrols, the same watches, the same entries in the duty logs, the same trader arriving at the same milecastle every month, the same tax collected, the same questions asked. Over time, this repetition became normal, and normal became powerful. The wall worked not because it was impenetrable, but because it made Roman authority inescapable and predictable. And beyond the wall, life continued. On the northern side, the people Rome called barbarians were not a unified enemy. They were tribal communities, farmers, herders, metalworkers. The Selgovai, Votadini, Novantai, groups with their own territories, hierarchies, economies. Some traded with Rome. Some raided Roman supply lines. Some did both, depending on the season, the leadership, the opportunity. The relationship was not binary, civilization versus chaos. It was negotiated, fluid, opportunistic. Roman sources describe periodic raids, livestock stolen, outposts harassed, patrols ambushed. But large-scale warfare was rare. The wall was not under constant siege. Most interactions were economic or diplomatic. Trade happened regularly at controlled crossing points. Roman goods, pottery, metalwork, wine, moved north. Hides, wool, slaves moved south. Commerce didn't stop at the frontier. The wall regulated it. Some northern groups were client states, semi-independent but aligned with Roman interests. Rome paid subsidies, offered protection, negotiated treaties. Tribal leaders were sometimes given Roman citizenship, educated in Roman customs, incorporated into the empire's political machinery. The empire expanded not just through conquest, but through co-option. Conflict, when it happened, was often internal. Tribal disputes, succession struggles, competition for resources, Rome exploited these divisions, backed one faction against another, created dependencies. The wall was part of this strategy, not a line between worlds, but a tool for managing a complex contested region. And the wall itself was not static. It was modified, expanded, abandoned, reoccupied over nearly 3 centuries. Under Hadrian, construction began around AD 122. His successor, Antoninus Pius, pushed the frontier north and built the Antonine Wall between the Firth of Forth and the Firth of Clyde, shorter, turf-built, less permanent. Within 20 years, it was abandoned, and Hadrian's Wall was reoccupied. Later, sections were reinforced. Gates were narrowed. New forts were added. The frontier moved because the situation changed. Populations shifted. Alliances broke. Resources became scarce or abundant. The wall adapted. It was not a monument frozen in time. It was a working system adjusted by emperors, generals, and local commanders responding to real conditions. In the early 3rd century, Emperor Septimius Severus campaigned extensively in northern Britain. His forces pushed deep into what is now Scotland, far beyond the wall. He died at York in AD 211, and his campaigns ended. The wall remained the frontier for another 2 centuries, but its meaning shifted. From aggressive expansion to defensive consolidation to administrative boundary. By the late 4th century, Roman Britain was under strain. Economic decline, political fragmentation, reduced military presence. The wall was still garrisoned, but units were under strength. Supply networks frayed. The rhythms that made the system work began to fail. By the early 5th century, Roman authority in Britain collapsed. The wall was abandoned, not destroyed in battle, but simply left. What remained was stone, and stone lasts. Today, sections of Hadrian's Wall still stand. Grass-covered mounds mark the vallum. Foundations of milecastles are visible. Tourists walk along reconstructed ramparts. The structure is incomplete, ruined, silent. But the questions it raises remain. How do you control movement without stopping it? How do you create authority not through force, but through presence? Through repetition? Through infrastructure that becomes so routine it feels inevitable? Hadrian's Wall didn't divide 2 worlds. It organized one. It made the landscape legible. It turned the messy, unpredictable flow of people and goods into something a state could process, tax, and manage. It was not a fortress. It was a bureaucracy made visible. Most days, nothing happened. Soldiers walked their routes. Traders passed through. Families lived ordinary lives. The wall worked because it was boring, because it was always there, because it turned power into routine. And systems built on routine don't need to be perfect. They just need to be persistent. The stones remain. Grass grows over the vallum. Tourists photograph the ruins. But the logic behind the wall, control through visibility, power through predictability, authority through infrastructure, never disappeared. It just moved.